All right, we're going to get started talking about the right, the left, and the Libertarian, the center, however we want to go about doing this. We'll talk about where we're headed as a state. Again, my name's Chris Berg, host of Point of View. Also, Joel Heitkamp will be helping us moderate, host of News and Views on the mighty 790 KFGO, I need to say. Mr. Sean Kelly, if you don't mind bringing up the iPad, sir, so people can text in questions and we can utilize those. And joining us today to have this discussion is the chairman of the Libertarian Party, Tony Magngnall. So, Tony, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I believe also the youngest chairwoman in the country. Is that right? Wow. Youngest chairwoman in the country, Kylie Oversen for the North Dakota Democrat Party. So thank you for being here. And also state senator and chairman of the NDGOP, Mr. Kelly Armstrong. So let's dive in here. And Joel, I'm going to let you start with any questions you want to jump in with. And
thank you, Chris. Chris and I are going to alternate and just take some questions. And like Chris and I were talking about in the back, you know, nobody tuned in at 10:30 every Saturday night to All-Star Wrestling for Nice. So settle in. Let's have some fun. I do want to, you look at these three faces, and these are three faces of the future, young people who got active in politics in one form or another. But the most interesting thing to me is that, and we utilize this a lot in talk radio, I know Chris does on POV, the fact that the Libertarian Party now has a place, and congratulations to you, because there was enough votes on the ballot. I think it makes everything we do better. I think it brings the debate further, but I have a theory, and I want to get your take on this. Okay, I don't think the Libertarian Party would have as big of an influence in North Dakota had the Republican Party not co-opted much of what the messaging of the Democratic Party was. In other words, the Republican Party, in my opinion, became Republican light on many issues. I'm going to give you an example, Kelly, and then I'll let you counter on this, okay? Democrats came out for early childhood education. They wanted early childhood education. That was always seen as a line in the sand. No early childhood education. It was Democrats that put that bill in. That bill failed as a Democrat-sponsored bill. Then the bill came back as a Republican-sponsored bill. The bill passed. And so for those people who want less government spending, they didn't get it from the Republican majority. So the first question goes to you, Kelly. Is the Republican Party truly a conservative party in North Dakota?
Yes, I believe it is. And in fairness, those two bills weren't exactly the same. One was in the 13th session, one was in the 15th session. And the 15th session bill was significantly scaled back from the bill in the 13th session. But yes, the Republican Party, I mean, we have a supermajority in the House, the Senate, hold every statewide office, hold two of the three federal offices, and when you get that big, we have a very big tent. And so we have more moderate Republicans, we have more conservative Republicans, but at the end of the day, yes, the Republican Party is a conservative party.
So he asked you, conservative party, and you look at the spending over the last 5 sessions, and what's it been, 20% spending almost every session since 2007, 2009? I mean, I know we've had some needs, but everybody I talk to that's in the NDGOP, the big thing here is why are we spending so much money? So how is that being truly conservative?
Well, and I think one of the things you have to address, and I know this from being out in western North Dakota, is the exponential rate of growth requires more action than a slow, steady rate of growth. And it's always hard for me because I was a prime sponsor of the surge bill, and I'll argue with anybody, conservative, liberal, libertarian, anybody on the planet that bill wasn't needed. And that was a $1 billion plus infrastructure bill. So everybody says we need less spending until you talk when you have year-over-year growth rates going on in the state of North Dakota, which is a fantastic thing to have. You have to have government reaction.
Kylie, the next question is for you. Why can't your party win?
Thank you, Joel. Oh, you know, as we watch waves of political parties go up and down year after year, it changes. It's not been all that long ago that we had a majority in the Senate in North Dakota, and I mean, Joel, as you know, somebody in your family won not too long ago. So I think that we can win given the right candidates and the right climate. I think, as you've already pointed out, the fact that the Libertarian Party is continuing to grow and do better is showing that there's a desire for change and more players at the table, and that a lot of people across the state are not entirely pleased with a supermajority. That doesn't mean we're going to win every election that we put a candidate up for the first time we try that. It takes years to build a party and to build on the growth that we've had, and we're in that process, and we'll keep going.
One thing I've just been noted, guys, if you can, when you speak, just speak to the audience because it kind of plays weird speaking to us. But along those lines, Kylie, I think Joel brings up a great point, and I've said this to Senator Snyder several times. Is it tough for you guys to win races because the quote-unquote Republican light that's taking place in North Dakota?
Chris, I think there's some merit to that question. I think there's definitely a sense in some legislative districts you could find the Democratic and the Republican candidates are very similar on a lot of issues. We particularly see that in Western North Dakota. We have more conservative Democrats there, and as we move east, we have more progressive Republicans. So there's not always a big distinction between those. But there, I mean, we could count a number of reasons why some of our candidates haven't won.
I want to bring Tony into this conversation. Tony, just for the sake of everyone else here, tell people what it means to be a libertarian.
Well, the short answer, I guess, is that we're fiscally conservative and more socially liberal, but we don't arrive at that answer just by saying, oh, these guys have this and these guys have this. Maybe we'll find ourselves somewhere in the middle. It's the fallacy of the middle that's called, and that's not how we arrive at our answers. Our policy decisions, we pass through the filter of what's called the non-aggression principle. It basically says no one has the right to initiate force or violence or coercion on anybody for any reason. We say that ends do not justify means. And from where we're sitting, the Republicans and the Democrats just look like the same to us. It's either borrow or spend or tax and spend, but you're going to get the same thing. Libertarians say, look, you are an end unto yourself. My ends don't justify the means of me taking from you to make sure this policy that I want to see enacted, or even a majority of my friends want to see enacted. You know, we respect liberty above all, and if a policy doesn't respect liberty, then it's not going to be our policy, which is why we are fiscally conservative. We want you to keep your money, and socially liberal. We want to leave you alone. It's none of our business. It's none of the government's business. It's your business. You're an end unto yourself, and if you believe that, then you're a libertarian.
So let's talk some specifics, Tony, because I think many people would say, hey, North Dakota's been doing pretty darn well as of late, so why would we need some changes? So let's say, for example, that your party had maybe a majority in that legislature, maybe there was a Libertarian governor. What would be different in North Dakota?
Well, we have done well. It's because we've tied our industry to basically a single income, and that has fled us. And we had a Republican supermajority who claimed to be fiscally conservative, but what do we have? We have massive overspending. If there was ever a time for Republicans to prove their case, it was in North Dakota over the last 4 to 8 years, and they flubbed it. They took all the money and they spent it, and now we've got real problems. So how would it look different under a libertarian? Well, certainly we wouldn't overspend. We'd certainly be on the lookout for any crony deals. We absolutely hate crony capitalism. We eat, sleep, and breathe anti-cronyism. So that would be our number one priority, is to make sure that, yes, we have this natural resource. Yes, we should make some money off it, but let's not sell ourselves out. Let's be conservative with how we spend this money, and let's understand that it's not going to always be here, and let's make sure our industry isn't solely reliant on oil. I mean, we've got some great farmland here. It seems like sometimes we forget that. We can't even get our wheat out of the state because the oil took up all the rail lines and all the methods by which to transport it out. So, I mean, now we're rising and falling with the price of oil, and that is not how it should be. And I don't think oil's ever going to get back over even $50 a barrel. So it's time for us to start thinking about other methods to help our state.
I'm going to go down a road that gets me fired from this job, but I'm going to do it anyway. This organization ran around putting billboards up saying how great the state was being run and promoting North Dakota, which I respect. I respect the fact that this organization always fights on behalf of North Dakota. But when you put billboards up in Moorhead saying we're the best run state in the country, and you're sitting there kind of throwing it in the face of people you do commerce with in Moorhead, and I remember the reaction as a talk show host, and then all of a sudden corn goes down to under $3 a bushel, and oil goes down to under $30 a barrel, we find out that the economy is not as diverse in North Dakota as we think. And I've had conversations with people daily that this is a make or break it year for a lot of young ag producers. And I direct this to Senator Armstrong. Do you believe that we're still the best run state in the union?
I do, and one of the reasons I believe we are, if commodity prices go down and a private farmer or oil prices go down and a private oil and gas company goes bankrupt, that is not a government issue. I mean, that is a private industry issue. But we've created plenty of our rainy day and reserve funds that exist for us to get through the next budget cycle. And oil will go above $50 a barrel again. The one thing you know about international commodities, and wheat will go above $3 a bushel again. But I will also agree that when people, for the past, when there are people who have said we were more diverse than we are a commodity-based economy, and regardless of government, we are going to run through these ebb and flows as economies cycle through the international market.
There's a lot of us that have called for oil and gas division to have a performance audit, the big audit, right? The Gordy Smith comes through the door and everybody goes, oh boy, here we go. I'm a big believer that audits are nothing but good. As a rural water manager, we got audited every year, and if there's something wrong, and believe me, every now and then there was, you corrected it. We just found out that the Department of Human Service had an absolutely atrocious audit. We're talking about drugs, we're talking about fondling, we're talking about all types of things. Should the head of the Department of Human Services in North Dakota be fired?
Is that for me?
Yes.
And
the reason it's for you is because you just said we're a great run government, and I think we got some problems.
And I think that audit pointed out some problems, and there's been a task force associated with the Human Services starting since April of this year. I tend to be a 10-year veteran of the Criminal Defense Court, and in a 35-page audit, there's about a 3-sentence paragraph as to those allegations. I don't know nearly enough about them as to where they came from, how widespread they were, whether there were ever criminal convictions. I just read the thing yesterday, and it literally is a three-sentence paragraph in the audit. I'm not comfortable answering that question without more information about those things and where it goes in the line.
I can appreciate that, but at least speak to me about the concern it raises for you when you hear about fondling, people that shouldn't be in these daycares are there. You've got illicit illegal drugs being in there. That just flat out isn't right.
Actually, that's not what it said, though. It said that
there's
there was
illegal
drug
drugs.
use. We don't even know if it was used in
How'd
the
they get in there if they're
daycare.
not using them?
It could be a daycare, somebody working at a daycare working after hours. I mean, I've read the 3 sentences. There is no detail in it. And that's my point. I don't know where it is and what happens with it because there's a 3-sentence paragraph. I don't have enough information
I have not
on
perused it, but from what I understand is the DHS has not refuted any of it.
Yeah, their response to the audit is question. I don't know what they know about it. You're asking me a question I can't answer because it's 3 sentences in a 35-page audit.
So you can't answer maybe the specifics, but as Joel's saying, being the best run state, does it concern you that you see that in an
Yeah,
audit?
that should concern anybody depending on what kind of scenario it is. I mean, it's salacious in the fact that you read it, but I mean, I want to know what the facts are behind it. I think we need to get to the bottom of it. And if they're bad, yeah, heads need to roll.
So she should be fired if it's in fact indeed true.
Well, I reject the premise of the question because I don't know what it is.
But I'm asking you, let's assume that it's true, should she lose her job?
Well, somebody probably should. Whether it's her or somebody else, I don't know where I don't know where it's at. I don't have enough information to answer that question.
Chairwoman Oversen, you want to comment on it?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Thanks, Chris. I serve on the Human Services Committee, so I work fairly closely with Maggie Anderson and many members of the Department of Human Services, and I think that Maggie inherited a mess. I think that a lot of these problems existed before she got into her position as director of the department. I don't think that she should lose her job. I think that there have been things done wrong and that things have been overlooked, and there is a lot of work left to do, but I know that she is trying awfully hard to bring this department to where it needs to be. And I don't think she's the person, though, that the buck stops at. I think that the governor as well needs to be at that table, and he needs to be taking responsibility for some of these things as well. And I think that all of our departments need to undergo these audits more frequently, but specifically when we're looking at the Department of Human Services, direct services that impact the citizens of the state, serious change needs to happen.
But, do you mind?
Go ahead.
So how do you, if nobody loses their job, I think that speaks volume if somebody does go, okay, there needs to clearly be some changes here. So you're saying no one should lose their job, then how are you going to initiate and instigate those changes to ensure this never happens in this state again? Assuming that this is true, obviously.
Yep, I don't think that, I'm not saying that nobody should lose their jobs, I just don't think it's Maggie that should. Because again, I think a lot of these problems existed before she was put into this role, and she has been working since she got in there to try and fix them, but there is a lot, a large web has been woven, and that'll take many, many years to unravel still.
Tony, question for you from the audience by our text. Obviously, you can see how to join in the conversation by text. They're wondering how you can have a Libertarian candidate for president who attacks and goes after the Second Amendment. Obviously, you were following Governor Johnson, Governor Weld. By the way, way cool commercials. I mean, addictive type commercials. These two are very good. But yes, Governor Johnson not afraid to get after the Second Amendment. How does that sit with you as a Libertarian?
Yeah, you're right. Very cool commercials. I wish that is the Gary Johnson that would show up at the debate stage. He frequently disappoints me when he's trying to defend libertarian principles. He kind of shrugs his shoulders and goes, well, there's somewhere in the middle, or I'll compromise on this. And frankly, that bothers me. Now, I know what he's trying to do. He's trying to just be more palatable for more people, get more votes. I just think that was some bad advice he's been given. I would love for him to go out there and actually stand up for real libertarian principles, among which is unfettered support for the Second Amendment.
Tony, quick question though, because I have this definition in my mind of libertarian and I like it. There's times that I really like it, but there's times I don't think that your candidates, and no one is 100% lockstep with their party. So let me ask it this way. Can you be a libertarian where, look, government, do what you do. Build your roads, we need schools obviously, but stay the hell out of my life. I mean, that's the message, right? Can you be a libertarian and be pro-life?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It really depends on where you define when life begins. That's the heart of that argument. If you think life begins as in the womb, then you extend all of the rights in response, to that a libertarian would extend to somebody in the womb. Jack Seaman, our House of Representatives candidate, is a pro-life candidate. I think he's got some exceptions for rape and incest, but absolutely, it all depends on where you define life. And if you define life right at the moment of conception, then you're applying rights right at the moment of conception. Being a libertarian is all about respecting liberty and respecting rights. And so to answer your question, it comes down is when do you apply rights? This
will kind of be for all three of you, and Tony, we'll start with you. Obviously, we had the conversation today about Measure 4, raising the tobacco tax. People are early in the morning, we had a conversation about mental health, saying we need more funding. Where are you at with legalizing recreational marijuana? And I want to do it in the context of a recent report that shows that part of the reason we're having this huge heroin epidemic is because the cartel, all the money dried up since we've been legalizing recreational marijuana. Now they're flooding the states with heroin, it's cheap, and we see the issues at hand.
Well, I'm for legalizing all drugs, including heroin. I know that's a lot for people to swallow. It's not that I'm pro-drug use, it's that I'm pro-liberty. And the fact is, there's a hockey stick of spending on the drug war over the last 20, 30 years. It just goes up and up and up. But the drug use and the drug addiction rate has stayed exactly the same. So what that tells me is that our drug war is a complete failure. It has torn apart our inner cities. It has visited untold misery upon our population, and it is also the foot in the front door of every home in America. Because now, even on the suspicion, I think I smell marijuana, I'm gonna come bust down your door, shoot your dog, take your grandma weed, and put you in jail. And what have we accomplished? Absolutely nothing. This is not a law enforcement issue at all. This is a public health issue, and it's a liberty issue. More specifically, it's a property rights issue. I own my body. I get to decide what substances go in it. If I own it, I decide what happens. I own my body. I decide what drugs. And you're right, heroin has flooded our streets, and in large part to fill the vacuum, the economic vacuum left behind from the marijuana profits that drug dealers make. But you've just proven my point. Once we legalize marijuana, all of a sudden our kids aren't buying them from these scary drug dealers, and drug dealers have to go to somewhere else. Tell you what, the moment you legalize heroin, what do? You pull the rug out from under these drug dealers, and if they were all legalized and they were all regulated by trained professionals, I'm sorry, you're not going to go to CVS and get a fentanyl-laced bag of heroin. That's just not going to happen. That's what we're seeing out there now. You can either have a society with drugs are illegal, but you still have drugs everywhere, or you can have a society where drugs are legal, but still have drugs everywhere. But not having drugs is not an option. So it's time that we learn to grow up with this issue, roll with the punch, and treat it like the public health issue that it is, and not the law enforcement issue that we've made it.
Kelly, I'll let you respond to that.
Well, I think you got to go to the next question then. If you're going to legalize drugs, and then you're also going to subsidize the treatment. And I think the issue at the end of the day, we've done a good job in North Dakota over the last couple of legislative sessions and I don't want my kids to buy drugs, by the way, from somebody who's lacing it with fentanyl or a store down the street. So regardless of that issue, I hope at the very least we're going to make sure they're adults before they do it. But legalizing marijuana is not the solution. Working for more and better treatment options and better criminal justice reform across the country. And this is a decade-old problem. This started with Nancy Reagan's this is your brain on drugs. Bill Clinton, as a Democratic president, put more people in the federal pen than any president before or since. So this is a 40-year-old problem, and it's how we deliver criminal justice and treatment to the drug issue. But no, legalizing drugs, any drugs, is not the solution.
But one of the challenges is one of the legal drugs that's having unforeseen consequences now because it was getting pushed so hard on us back in the 90s from Big Pharma is legal opioids, the oxy, those things. And now it's created this situation where you've got all these people that are hooked on opioids, they can't afford it, and they go get heroin.
Well, the one thing you learn about the drug cycle, when I first started practicing criminal law, it was meth and clandestine meth labs in North Dakota and Minnesota. After those dried up, then the cartel got into meth, and then from actually very good work from our former U.S. Attorney, Lieutenant Governor Drew Wrigley, a lot of those meth pipelines got crushed, and then you move from a drug, and that's the one thing you will always see. The drug war is cyclic. When it's one drug, then it's another drug, then it's another drug. But yeah, the opioid addiction crisis is a problem, and hopefully we're learning about overprescribing those drugs for a legitimate injury, and having pain that turns into addiction, that turns into crime, is not a solution.
Kylie, weigh in on this.
There's not, if the problem that we're looking at is the abuse of drugs and putting too many people in our prisons for drug use, legalizing recreational marijuana is not the answer to that problem. We had the conversation last session about medicinal marijuana, and I voted to support that. I think there's legitimate reasons to have that conversation. But when we look at the drug crisis in the state, it is not a black and white, yes or no, one solution problem. It involves law enforcement, and it involves treatment, and it involves bringing families to the table, and it involves so many things. One of the things that we've done well in North Dakota is our prescription drug monitoring programs, so that we have a better handle on where drugs are at in the state and who has access to them. It hasn't gone far enough because clearly young people are still getting a hold of those drugs. I've had teenagers right in my district who have been found dead from drug overdoses, and that's scary, and that's definitely a problem we need to solve. But it's not, again, not one solution. It's many people coming to the table to have that conversation. And if there was an answer, we would have implemented it already. We clearly haven't found the right way to do that.
We're going to start here and go all the way down to there, okay? So Kelly, you start. Are you proud of your presidential candidate, and do you think you've got the best person you could to run? Each one of you now. You each have an endorsed candidate. They're out there running a campaign. I want you to weigh in on your presidential candidate.
Yes, and is he the best person that could have possibly run? Probably not. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know who that would be. But yeah, I'm proud of him. I think his message of deregulation and lowering taxes and opening markets is what fits for North Dakota. And at the end of the day, it's a binary choice. If I had Hillary Clinton in front of me, I would ask her one question, and that's, what are you going to do with the communities of Beulah and Hazen when you shut down the coal plants? So at the end of the day, yeah, I'm proud of him, and I hope he wins.
Kylie?
I'm absolutely proud of Hillary Clinton as our candidate. I think she's extremely qualified, and as someone who wants to work in legal services sometime, it's exciting for me to see someone who started at legal services doing good work at such a high level, so I'm absolutely proud of our candidate.
Well, Hillary may be our worst president ever, but Trump would definitely be our last. And I'm happy to say that Gary Johnson is the only adult in the room whenever those three are in the room. Now, if we could just get him in the room, that would be great. Now, I've got my problems with Gary Johnson. He's probably the lightest libertarian you've ever heard of, but you've heard of him, so I'm happy.
Kylie, for you, you say you're very proud of Hillary Clinton. Joel opened up this door, so I'm walking through it. James Clapper with national security in the Obama administration said that in 50 years he has not seen the world in as much of a mess he's seen in the last 50 years. Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State, our candidate, I will, if you will, GOP candidate says Clinton, Obama birthed ISIS. I don't want to get into the weeds here, but my point is, as Secretary of State, you look what happened in Libya, what's happened in the Middle East, what James Clapper said. Her greatest accomplishment as Secretary of State is what?
Her greatest accomplishment, that's the question. I think I'm particularly proud of the outreach that she's done for women and girls across the globe as Secretary of State. That's an initiative we hadn't seen before from someone in that position. And the notion that President Obama and Secretary Clinton birthed ISIS is ridiculous, and that shouldn't even be a point of that conversation. But certainly the mess that we're in right now as a globe didn't start and end in 8 years, and the next president isn't going to end that problem. It's a long time coming, and it'll take years again to get out of that.
So what specifically has Secretary Clinton done for women and girls around the world?
Starting years ago, she's recognized that as a country and as a world, we need to recognize women's rights as human rights. And she's brought that conversation as Secretary of State to different countries and stood up for women who are still underrepresented and oppressed in countries in ways that we don't see here in the United States. And again, we haven't seen a Secretary of State value that type of policy and initiative in a way that we've seen with Hillary Clinton.
Kelly, my question for you is, do you believe that Donald Trump lied to the Republican voters in the primary process to get this nomination, playing to that far right that he knew was going to turn out then? Because he seems to be reversing himself when it comes to immigration and deportation now. And a follow-up question to that, and I'll let you just go ahead and go with it, is do you believe ever we're going to have a wall on the southern border of this country?
I'll do the second one first. Oh, well, I'll do the first one. They call it the softening, and I think, it'll test the levels of what a pivot is between a primary race and an election race, and we'll see how it evolves. This just came up over the last 48 hours, and we'll see how it evolves over the while before we determine whether he broke a promise or if he's refining his position. With regard to the wall, I don't know if we'll ever have a wall, but before we can get to real immigration reform, and I've represented illegal immigrants in federal court, we have to secure our borders, because the conversation is a non-starter until we get our borders secure. So whatever method that is, obviously what we've had going on for the last 25 years hasn't worked. So I think it's about time for something new and novel, because we have to secure our southern border.
So do you support a quote-unquote litmus test about if they believe that Sharia should trump the Constitution, they shouldn't be allowed in the country? That's what Newt Gingrich has obviously supported. Trump has sounds like a pretty good extreme vetting is the word that he's using.
Yeah, I believe in extreme vetting. I don't think you ever get one question out of the deal. Again, that would be a policy that you'd have to look at very simply. We determine, if you don't have borders and you don't determine who comes in and who comes out, then you don't really have borders. So yeah, I think we should be a little more strict about who we let in.
A lot of the debate on immigration, and it involves all of you, so don't feel free to go ahead and chime in on this, but a lot of the debate on immigration is in acts of terror. We've had acts of terror done by Americans themselves. Oklahoma City instantly comes to mind. But the true fact of the matter is we pick fights with people that weren't necessarily the ones that picked a fight with us. And I realize Al-Qaeda and everything is a moving, they're mobile, they go. But somehow we turned a bunch of Saudi Arabians attacking us on 9/11 into a fight with Iraq. And so does anybody want to explain to me how we as a country spend more than the 25 countries below us combined on national defense, and 24 of those are our allies? And so if we truly are about saving money, why are we in these fights? And I'm going to start on the Libertarian side.
Well, you covered a whole range of issues: foreign policy, immigration, and I could speak to all of them. I'll try and do my best here. So as far as our war adventuring overseas, of course, that's been a terrible catastrophe, and it's really, the roots of that go all the way back to World War I. I'll spare you that. But, what it boils down to is, you say national defense, that's not what we're paying for. We're paying for international offense. We're paying for a curtain around all of Europe and around all of our oil interests and around Japan. So we're not defending America. We're defending most of the globe, and that's why we spend so much more than everybody else. It's not that we've got way more tanks than everybody. We do, but it's not that we spend it all on actual military gear. We're spending it defending Europe, basically, and Japan. So that's where the money's going. Libertarian policy calls for a massive decrease in military spending. We could cut 60% off our military budget and still spend more than the next 5 countries combined. Let's bring those forces home. Let's secure our borders with actual military defense and not international nation-building offense. And let's go back to that beacon on the hill. Let's start living by our principles instead of trying to export them by force. That will never work for us, and we will always suffer the blowback from that. And one more thing, not to sound like a libertarian cliche, but if you want to fix immigration on the southern border, end the drug war. Mexico is a failed narco state that is there to supply our drug demands. If we legalize drugs and we regulate and we have a trusted, proper person from whom people can go to get help or even just purchase drugs, all of a sudden the narco-terrorists down in Mexico no longer have power. All of a sudden their economy and their country can come back, and now they don't have to stream across our southern border just looking for a better life, because that's what it's about.
Wow, that's a lot to respond to as well. Do we overspend in our military and defense? Absolutely. Does that mean that we shouldn't be supporting our veterans and our military? No. I think we need to look at efficiencies within the Department of Defense, within the Pentagon, and find where we're overspending, because we absolutely are. If you look at the growth in those areas and try to find where the money is actually going, there's serious problems. But I think we do need to focus our spending on the people that we have, the veterans and military that are currently serving, and make sure that they are still well equipped and not take away from those people.
This is kind of for all you in a way, but are parties becoming irrelevant? And I say this in the context of, you look at what happened to Bernie Sanders. Many people would say if it wasn't for the email situation, there wasn't a fair shot. He may have had a better opportunity to pick up some delegates. You got the superdelegate situation. And Kelly, more specifically for you, even right here, I mean, Wentz Engine had the backing of the NDGOP and yet lost by 22 points. How did that happen? 1, and 2, are state parties becoming somewhat irrelevant?
I think state parties probably this election cycle have been a little less relevant than previous years. I mean, we had Bernie Sanders, Governor Nelson supported Bernie Sanders. We had Donald Trump on the presidential side. We have Doug Burgum running, who's done a great job. But yeah, I mean, this has been a very interesting election year. And if you've been around this long enough, and I've been around it longer than the other two on stage, but not as long as some. I mean, each election's different, but I think social media, Facebook, the access to information and the availability of processing your own information has gotten people more involved and more independent, which is a great thing. It's the job of the party to reach out to those people and make sure and bring them into the fold.
Okay, you get like 30 seconds. Well, we're already out of time the way it looks. We'll start down on the Libertarian side, move back this way. 30 seconds why you should vote Libertarian.
You should vote Libertarian because you are already a Libertarian and you just don't know it. You've just been sold this two-party meme, and it doesn't have to continue going this way. That, you know, it's like they put up a monster, the other side puts up a monster, and we're just trying to stop the lesser of two evils. We got to quit that. We got to quit that, and just start voting your conscience. Vote Libertarian because we care about you.
Voting for the Democratic-NPL is voting for candidates and values that support all North Dakotans. And we look at the economy of late. We were trying so hard to attract workers to the state because we have so many unfilled jobs. That doesn't just take companies, it takes people to fill those jobs. And the Dem-NPL is working hard to make sure that the environment we have here supports those workers and supports those companies, and we'll continue to do that work.
Vote for Republican because we're the party of the First Amendment, the party of the Second Amendment. We are pro-business and we're for lower taxes.
All right, how about a big round of applause for our panel, ladies and gentlemen. Grab yourself a cup of coffee. When we come back, the Legacy Fund and or the Bank of North Dakota. Go ahead, Tom.
That's right, and we're also going to put a survey up so you guys can vote quickly. And whose vision do you most closely align with? There's the question you can see on the big screen. Democrats, GNDC 9. Libertarians, GNDC 10. Republicans, GNDC 11. Cast your votes. We'll see some live results. And as Joel mentioned, we'll take a quick timeout. So if you want to grab a cup of coffee, a cookie, a glass of water, please feel free to do that. Run to the restroom. And up next on deck, the Legacy Fund and or the Bank of North Dakota. So we'll be right back.